on a mighty endeavor. In this hour of great sacrifice,
Duty first.
we shall prevail.
How many casualties?
We executed the mission.
How many?
We had orders! You're a long way from Texas, farm boy.
Play Mad Max 30 days early.
You're a long way from Texas, farm boy.
All right, welcome to another Reactor stream. My name's Chris with Click Team. Today we're going to talk about the weirder stuff entries, and we're going to build a level editor per request on our forums. It was one of the suggestions made recently on the Patreon site. I believe it comes straight to us from Jeffrey, who said at the end here, how to make a level editor so you can create one of those single frame games. I've heard about it, but no idea how that works. So I thought maybe we should go over that because that seems like one a lot of people could use. So first, let's talk about Weirder Stuff. Weirder Stuff voting ended, and we have a couple winners for our two main prizes. Yazy Games came up with Galactic Break and became the #1 winner right here. And then followed up by Max with the Fate of Night. We're going to play both, but just so you guys can see, here are your prizes. So you've got the cool Weirder Stuff 2 shirt. I'm also sporting one. And then, as promised, your Season 1 of Stranger Things DVD. And the digital rewards will be sent out separately. Make sure that you PM me on the Click Team community forums so that I can have get a dialogue going to get your information so we can get you your prizes. We appreciate you competing, and I think we should at least play the first two. So let's take a look at Galactic Break. We're going to run that now. I don't know if I should trust them, but I'm going to anyways. We got your typical start menu, WASD keys, space for options. We can turn off the full screen. Let's see. No, I guess not. Okay, so it's left, right to turn it off. Cool. And I just want to make sure people can hear me. Can you guys hear me? Hear me. Just make sure the audio's on. It is. Okay, good. So Galactic Break, let's check it out. Liking the music. Well, level 1, of course. Space to thrust. We're going to make it to the pad. So far, nothing out of the ordinary. Now, what was cool about this game is it created obstacles that you can't see unless you flash the light, and you'll blow up on if you hit it. Now, in the previous build, this is an older build, I had asked him if you could make it so that it would restart the game. Because notice I had to escape to get into it. And I think we're going to turn down the music a little bit. There we go. Let's try that level 2 again. Oh boy. I made it. Alright. Looks like this board I gotta make it through a collapse. Oh! Let's try that one again. Okay, so you shoot the barrier out of the way. And also the barriers. Oh no! Ah! This game's hard. Shoot the barrier out of the way. Try not to get killed in the process. Okay. More shooting stuff. I wonder if you can make this work on mobile. This might be fun on mobile. Game over, level 6. And there is, for you to try, 10 levels. Pretty cool. And this is the grand prize winner. Good job. And let's try the next game, which I believe is called Super Small Loading Screen. No, that's not the name of the game. The Fate of the Nights. Alright, so I guess we click. We go out with friends. Black Guy John. That's an interesting description. And a school friend Jane. Alright. So it looks like I have a flashlight. Oh. Something got me. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I like the ambiance. I don't know quite what I'm doing. Can I jump? If I ignore it, does it know? Yeah, I keep dying. I get it. I'm dead. Great. Great. What's that? There's a grave. I better not go in there. You know? That's nice, but where do I go? Oh, there you go. Jump us up. Oh. Alright, well, it looks pretty cool for 2 days worth of work, but I don't know quite how we're playing. Maybe if I run all the way here and hide it. Nope. He went away. Fill up my battery. Keep telling me not to go down there. What's that? Is that another guy? I'm not out of battery juice. Oh, I'm going further. Jane. Well, there you go. It looks like if you run away from him, he'll eventually leave. But I ran out of juice on my flashlight, so we can't go any further. You can see the scores right here. And then we had some runner-up. Visit Weirder Stuff 2 on itch if you want to see the different entries. We had, I believe, what, 18 this time around? Pretty cool. And if you simply remove the 2, I believe you get, oh, maybe it's, there you go. And this is the 36 entries from the last jam. So if you still haven't had your fill of Halloween, you can play these games on both the 2 different jams we've had. Pretty cool. Again, congratulations to those winners, and we'll get those prizes out ASAP. So let's build a level editor. Here we go. Here's our blank application I've created. And the very first thing we're going to do is we're just going to create an active object. And we're going to make it a solid color for brick. Just a brick of some sort. Right? Or maybe it's a grass tile. Let's go grass. Darker grass. And then using the pressure tool, lower that down to 10, lower the pressure down, and just make some cheesy looking grass. There you go, we've been grassed. Oh, okay, grass. Now, grass tile. We'll name it grass tile. A lot of level editors are tile based, and so one thing we're going to do is we're going to, as we learn how to do this, clone that, make it a cursor object. So this will serve as our cursor object, and the first animation will be the grass tile, and we'll leave the grass tile up here for selection. So, very first thing we do is we say always, and we want to set the cursor to position X, X mouse, but then we're going to divide it by 10, or rather, I'm sorry, 32, the size of the object, and then we multiply it by 32. And if I was just to run that, you'll see that it's now snapping vertically to the X position of 32. Now we need to do the same thing with Y. So we say Y mouse divided by 32, multiply by 32. And basically what that does is it takes whatever the position is, breaks it down into a 32-bit scale, and then multiplies that by 32, positioning it along the screen. So if we did it right, now we've kind of got this snapping to effect for our level editor in a simple line of code. Another thing we might want to do, just for giggles, we'll clone our grass objects, move it down here, and then we're going to clear it with a dark brown color, and then a lighter color for brown. We'll make our dirt. Just a basic, happy little dirt pile. Okay. And we'll call that dirt tile. That way we can see the differences between the two tiles. Dirt tile. And then we got to copy that. And we'll put that here so that now we have 2 frames, 1 for each tile in the stopped animation. And we're going to declare for the cursor a value, and we're going to say selected tile. And then here we're going to say tile number. And same thing here. Tile number. And then we're going to go ahead and set that one to 1 and leave that one at 0. I'm going to give these guys a shared group using qualifiers, and we'll just call it areas. Areas is fun. There we go. Now, here we're going to add another condition, another action rather. We're going to force the animation frame to whatever we have set for selected tile. Then, if the mouse clicks on an object, that being our group for tiles, we'll then set value A, selected tiles, to the tile number. And let's just move that over there. I'm going to put a little space here in between our tiles so we know which ones are tiles and which one's the cursor. And then we run it. So it defaults to green because green is the 0 frame and it's also the 0 tile. But if I click this, I should get brown. Green, brown, green, brown. Okay, now we're going to do another event. We're going to say if the user clicks, and we're going to say is the mouse over an object, and we'll select our tile group, but we're going to negate that because we want to make sure that when we're clicking to place a tile that it's not over one of our tile buttons. That wouldn't make any sense. So that negated condition will help us do that. Then we're going to run a fast loop called creates tile. And we'll just do it once. And then on loop, create tile. Right? And if the currently selected tile, let's hope I got this right, selected tile, right, equals 0. And then because we have 2 tiles, we'll copy that. And we'll make the event for the second tile. Then what we do is we create a, oh, forgot to do one thing. I'm doing this from the hilt. So let's call this one, clone it, put that up here, remove the qualifier, and we will make sure that we do not create it at start. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing here, duplicate, place it up here. I duplicated, that's not what we want. We want to clone. Clone. Now we get a second iteration of the object, a new version of the object, and then we need to remove the group. And we need to cut down on the object at start. We don't want it at start, neither of these. Okay, good. Now, we're going to rename some of these to make more sense. Dirt tile selection. Or if you think about it, you really want the selection word first. Oh, selection, dirt, stickler for naming things correctly, and then grass tile, rename, selection, grass. That way they're files together, and then we could probably say tile, dirt, and then tile, grass. Okay, so the reason why we rename them and clone them is these are going to be the buttons, and we don't want to create new buttons on the screen. We want to create these new iterations of the actual tiles. These also will need a shared group, which we will call, I believe we have a map piece. Inventory, hide, areas. We'll just use reference points. All right, and they preserve their tile number, as you can see. They sync up, which will be important later. So, back to here, when we click on an empty space that's not over a tile button, we want to create a tile, so we do the fast loop. And then what we do is we create the object, and in this case, we grass tile relative to our cursor. And then we do the same thing here. We create the dirt tile relative to the cursor. So if we run it, I'm creating grass tiles. Switching to dirt, and you see it didn't create a dirt tile. And then I can place my dirt tiles. And you get the idea of what we're doing here. So now we have to save the data. Now the easiest way to save it would be with an INI file, which we'll go ahead and not use an INI file. I think we'll use the list file. So what we'll do is we'll grab a list object, we'll place it over here, and then we're going to need a new button. So let's clone this one, and no, we're not going to use the button. We're going to grab just a regular button object. You can change it around however you want, but doing this from the hip, I think makes it more fun for you. So sometimes I don't have a predefined plan. And we'll call this button save. Save. And then we identify it as button save. All right. So what the save button is going to do is it's going to launch our saving algorithm. And we're going to use delimiters to achieve this. So if the button is clicked, okay, then we're going to start a group, save data, and we're going to make sure that group is off. And when the group's on, we're going to pick one reference point. We're going to pick one group at reference point, and then we're going to add a line to our list object, which is going to be consisting of position X. Notice, because we're writing a line, we'll have to convert that to a string. And then we're going to add a delimiter, which I'll get to in a minute. And then we'll need to get Y, because you can't have X without Y typically. And then another delimiter. And then the final string data we're going to get is the tile number. So that'll store the data from the selected randomly tiles, one of these two tiles. And then the final thing we need to do is destroy the particular tile that we're messing with. Okay, so let's just run that and see what happens. First, we got to activate the save data group when the button's clicked. So we lay some tiles down. Okay, change to dirt. So now you've got a good number of tiles down. Now, hit the save button, and it did not destroy any of the green tiles. So that means that our qualifier for group reference points did not make it to tile grass. Let's take a look. It did. So that's interesting. And it made it there. So why didn't it destroy it? All right. Because we created cursors. Created tile dirt and selection grass tile. So I was creating more buttons rather than actual tiles. So debugging, it's always fun. So we want to create tile grass relative to cursor. So let's run it again, and we'll just test it real quick. We knew it was grass we were having problems with. Save, and it's added the data. So the data now is on each line, you have the X coordinate, Y coordinate, and the tile type. Great. Now, we have another line that says picker count, compare to the number of group reference objects. If it's equal to 0, then we're going to save the data. All right, so we save list file, and we're going to use an expression because later you're going to want to feed it your own save file name. So I'm going to go with @path, and I'm just going to say save level. Okay, and if we do that correctly, group deactivate save data. Then when I save this to desktop, need a new folder. That folder being level editor, and we'll call this level editor. So we save it, we run it, and then we run it, and we build the level. Change it out a little bit. Make a cool little pattern. Okay, so there we go. And then I'm going to pull up the folder that we're in. And that folder being level editor. So no file yet. Save. And then we've got an actual file here, which is called a level file. But it's ASCII based, so we can open it up and see there's our level data. Excellent. Now we want to be able to load that data back in, correct? So we need a new button. We need load. So let's go ahead and create a load button. Clone. And then we'll change that to load. And rename it. Load. And now we write our load algorithm. Okay, so first thing we should get for a load algorithm is we need to get a file selector object. We'll drop it in here. And we'll ask our kids to hush up while I'm live. And then, sorry about that. And then we'll go ahead and do the load section. So we drag that there, change it to the load button, and then we're going to add a new group. I think we'll need a new group, I'm not sure. Load data. And then we're going to go ahead and open file selector, open load selector. We're going to use @path string, and let's just test it and see if it works. Load. We're getting nothing. And I think that's because I forgot one critical bit. The old DOS star point star, which allows us to read any file. So load, there we go. Now what I could do is I determined that our extension is .level. So if I put LVL here, it should only show us the .level. So there you go, there's our save file. Great. Now, insert comment, loading a level. Okay, and then we're going to add a new event. and it's conditional on this file selector on OK. So if we have an on OK, then we're going to load. We're going to reset first, and then we're going to File, load a list file. We're going to use an expression, and the expression is going to be the file selector get result path name. And if we do that right, nothing in our list object, load, save, and now the content's in there. So the content we saved is now back in the list object. All right. So now that we've done that, let's turn this off, and we'll say group of events, activate load data, and then on load data, we'll say compare to general values. We'll compare the number of lines is greater than 0. Okay, and then we need the string parser. One of my favorite objects. I can do so much with string parser. All right, so string parser is an object, if you haven't used it, it allows you to manipulate string data. You can parse it out based on delimiters, you can concatenate, you can pull out segments, replace text, you can do all sorts of amazing, wonderful things to it. In this case, we're going to use it so that when we look at our save file, by the way, that's a save file I write for another game called Fading Sun's Noble Armada, and you can see I'm using similar information. The delimiter here is this symbol right here. But in our current game, no, we don't need a message for Nico. We're using this symbol. Important to remember that. So what we're going to do is now we're going to set the source string to the first line. So get line 1. So we're always going to work with the first line. And also make sure that your list object is 1 base, because if it's not checked to 1 base, then you would want your first line to be 0. So now that we've set the source string, we're also going to set the delimiter. The delimiter is that character I showed you that lets us determine how to separate the text into chunks. And we'll call that delimiter 0, because it is a 0-based equation. Now, technically, I usually put the delimiter first. It's just a habit of mine. I don't know if it really affects anything or not, but it's something I ended up doing. Now, I have set the delimiter, and I've set the source string to 1. I'm going to create another line, and I'm going to do a comparison based on the contents of the string. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if, comparing 2 general values, I'm going to pull element 3. And the reason why we're pulling element 3 and seeing if it equals 3 is because if we look at our data again, this is the actual determination of what type of tile it is. And of course, we won't see if 3 equals 3. We don't want to see if 3 equals 0. If 3 equals 0, then we're going to create tile grass, which is the first one. We'll put it off screen. So it's off screen. And then we go to tile grass. Just going to reorder these real quick so it makes sense. Group reference points, and that can go in here. And then we'll put that there. And we'll get rid of that. Okay. Reorder that. Now, create tile. We've created the grass tile, but we created off screen. We still have 2 pieces of data to work with, and that would be the x and y coordinates. So what we'll do is we'll feed the x coordinates based on the string value. So again, this is going to return a text value, a string value. So when I get element and I get element 1, it's actually need to be converted using the value conversion into value data. I'm going to copy all that because, believe it or not, we're going to do the same thing for y, and that would be the second piece of data. And then that will create a grass tile. And then the final thing we have to do is we need to delete a line, line 1, because we're now done using this line. We need to remove it from the list. We copy the events. We change the comparison to 1 for the dirt tile. Then we go here. We create the dirt tile. We create it off screen just like we did the other one. We remove the grass tile creation. And then we change the dirt to read the new XY position. Now, these will only execute while the lines in the list object are full. So once the list line equals nothing, then looks like I got an emergency here on my phone. All right. And then we will close the group. Deactivate, load data. All right, so let's run it. And then we click on load. We load the save, and it recreated our save file. And then that's the same kind of routine you could use to build the level in your actual game. So it's a very simplistic version of a level editor. I hope that explains it out pretty well. I'm going to see if there's any questions at this point. And I don't see any questions here. Any questions, ladies and germs? And let's see if there's any questions in YouTube. And I'll say hello back. Any questions? So far, no questions. Let's see what else we can add to this. So we want to make sure that we don't create a tile when we're clicking on the buttons. As you can see, I've resaved the data. And now we have nothing here. Now, yes, Jeff, I'm going to polish up the space game and I want to load it up for $10 and up reactants in the Click Store and on the forums. Absolutely going to load that up. I want to polish it up a little bit, fix a couple of the bugs we had, but being it had been 2 streams, or maybe 3 streams of doing it, I figured it was time to move on. But I do want to polish it up and get it out there. And I hope that you took advantage of the last one I posted, which was Get Wrecked. And hope that was fun. There's some really cool color shifting going on there using the RGB coefficients. And I just added trying to make it work for iPhone and Android. Instead of shifting the coefficients of the object's base color, I have been tried doing pixel swapping colors. And we can actually show that to you real quick if you want to see it. So we go here, and we go back to me. Oh, wrong folder. And then we go to the Reactor. Get Wrecked, and I believe it's Get Wrecked 14. And then we've got Get Wrecked 13. So 13 is what we were working with before. Actually, it wasn't. Get Wrecked PC, which is in here. Okay, so what we did here is we're using the in the color swap group, we are storing RGB values in individual objects values, and then doing comparisons on them to do the shifting. And we're shifting by a value of 2. And then down here you see that we're setting the RGB coefficient to whatever those values are. And the reason why that works is because all the objects are white. Well, it works great, but it runs like a dog on mobile. So what I'm trying to do is make it work on mobile, and I'm experimenting with color shifting using the replace color command. And so far it's working all right. I still have some slowdown with the angle of the circle, and I don't know how I'm going to fix that. But in this case, what we do is I have an object that is a base color object right here that starts at white, and we pick its color. We pick its color using the get red out of an RGB, get green, get blue. And then using that, I replace the color of whatever this is with the new color that we're shifting to. So it's identifying the color and then swapping it out with the new color based on what the what you see here, these values here. So the next time you come up to picking it, the new colors are these colors. You do your math and you swap them out. And it seems to work pretty well. Let's see if we can turn it on and turn it on and run it. And we got a problem there. I think the problem is I'm hiding the tail. So tail objects. And for some reason I'm not creating the tail. I was in the middle of working on it. Create tail. Yeah, so that's, I don't want to get into it, but when it's all said and done, I hope it runs like this on mobile. Oh, wrong one. So it runs great on PC. And I think it could be a fun little game. But as an example, I was kind of hoping to show you guys how to use the coefficient functions and now the replace color functions, because they're rarely used. I've hardly used them. In fact, all experimenting with this has caused me to want to implement some of it in Dead Odyssey, one of my games. But, you know, it can make some cool effects like that, which is kind of cool. All right, let's see if there's any other questions. Okay, and no questions there. So, what else can we do with the level editor? Let's take a look. We've got load, we've got save. We're using the file object and string parser, very powerful stuff. I mean, really, at its core, this is what you need. Not a whole lot to pull it off. This is kind of a similar thing I used for Quaddle, and that allowed me to build 128 levels so far with ease. One thing I did with the Quaddle level editor, and depending on your game, you may want to do it with yours. Quaddle was a puzzle game, and so one thing I did is before allowing the game to be saved, before the user or me, when I was building levels, be able to save it, I had to play it and complete it. And that way I assured myself that I never built a level that was unbeatable. So you got to really think about what the goals are when designing a level editor. What are you trying to facilitate? If you're just building maps, then you know, great, it'll do that. But if you're trying to build other stuff like the map itself interact with gameplay, then things like making sure that the game can be played and finished before saving it is helpful. And when you build those little things into, you can find that you can add it to your own game and give the tool to the player, especially in a game like Quaddle, which we did, gives more value to the player and more reason to buy the game because they can design their own levels. So pretty cool. Another thing you could do is you could integrate procedural generation into your level editor. Using seed values, you could like place a single tile and then have it create grass around it based on an algorithm. And then you're only having to keep track of a few of these items that you place, the seed generators, and then the rest is generated by the game, which will save down the amount of data you have to collect, which is pretty cool too. So I'll polish this one up too, put some more comments on it, and we'll post it up with the other examples. Do you guys have anything else you want me to add to the level editor? Okay, so I got a new question. Can you also create tiles on different layers and see the tiles parallax while making the level? Hey, that's an excellent question. Let's see if we can do that. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a new level. So we'll go with level 2. And then we're going to need to be able to differentiate which level we're on. So we'll grab a string object. And we'll just use that to tell us what level we're on. String. And we'll put that here. And then we need to make the frame bigger for parallax purposes, for ease of use. So we'll just say 2000 by 2000. And then I'm going to create a camera object real quick. And I'm going to put that in the center of my screen initially, which is 568 by 320. And then I'm going to give it we already have an always event, so we'll say center screen under storyboard controls, scrollings, center window position of frame relative to the active, which we will rename to camera. And then I'm going to give it a movement. We'll just go with the built-in 8 directions movement. And let's see if that does anything. And so yes, you can see that I'm moving the elements away, which we don't want to happen. So we need to take those elements, these elements, and we need to remove follow the frame. And these buttons here, we need to remove Follow the frame. Let's check it again. And everything seems to be scrolling correctly. And we can test it by dropping some items and see if we can scroll around. We're scrolling around. Just a real quick polishing item. We don't want to see that object, so we will make it invisible. And now we've got that. Now we need a new button. Clone. We'll put it down here with our other level editor item, the text string. You know what? We don't even need the text string. We'll just do that. And we will say here, and then we'll declare a global value. You could make it a local value if you wanted. Current layer. Okay. And then layer 2, we're going to actually make layer 1. Yes, I have dogs. So we'll make it scroll less using the parallax XY coefficient scrolling options in the layers properties. We've got the top layer at 100% and then 0.5% for here. And then we'll call this layer button. We know we have 2 layers, so we'll say comment select layer. And if the button is clicked, we're going to add to the global value 1. If that current value, can you put them in the bedroom, please, is greater than 1, then we set it back to 0, because that's how we'll cycle through them. And then we're going to do some equal conditions. If it's equal to 1, if it's equal to 0, and we're going to do that because we want to inform the player or the user what layer we're on. So if it's set to layer 0, then we'll say layer 0. And if it's set to layer 1, we'll set layer 1. And you can make it 1 based if you want. That's up to you. Now let's test that and see if it works. So layer 0, layer 1, layer 0, layer 1. Okay, now, while we're doing this, we're also going to take the cursor and we're going to change its layer. So layer 1 for current layer 0 and layer 2 for, so it looks like layers are 1 based, so we should probably change this to 1 based. So we'll go 1, 2, current layer greater than 2, set it back to 1, and we got to give it an initial value of 1. That way it's less confusing. You know, sometimes you'll get lost when debugging something. Well, why isn't it working? And it's just simply because you have a 0-based system on one end and a 1-based system on the other. And then we need to change this to let people know which layer we're actually on. Good. Now let's see if it's creating correctly. So I'm going to create some dirt tiles on layer 1. Then I'm going to create some green tiles on layer 2. Now currently we're set to match, but if I move the cursor, we get that parallax effect. So you know that the grass tiles are on layer 2 and the brown tiles are on layer 1. Now the trick is, though, is if I save the data, we're not telling anything, we're not telling the save data what layer the object's on. So what we need to do then is, and this is something I'm not quite sure if we can even do, we need to add an extra piece of data to our save string. And we'll do that by grabbing another delimiter, dropping it there. And I don't know if we can pull layer, so let's find out if we can. And I believe it was reference points and position. Get layer, excellent. So that will return what layer it's on. So, do we still have our, okay, let's put that here so we can see what it looks like. And then we're going to, again, switch to dirt, dirt underneath, grass on top. And let's see if it's working. And it didn't work, and that's because I didn't change the layer. So we'll switch to dirt. User error. Now it works. And there you go. You can see that it's parallaxing. So let's save and see what happens. Now we get that extra piece of data. You see that the fourth column shows us which layer it's on. So that's excellent. But now that we've added an extra piece of data, we also have to account for that in our load data. So now we're going to have two groups here, potentially. Or maybe we can just set exposition. Okay, so maybe we can just pop it into the right layer. And we'll do that by adding a new event, a new action rather. And it is tile grass, order, move to layer, and then we'll pull the element, and it's element 4. And I'm doing something wrong. Because it's got to be a value. Oops. Let's do that again. Insert tile grass, move to layer, get element, element 4. That returns a string. We need to convert it into a value. So I've copied it, and then I just drop it in for value. Excellent. So that should work. And then we need to copy that event, that action, because we'll need it on our dirt line too. And then we say here, it'll be set to grass, drop that down, and now it's dirt. And if everything goes according to plan, we run it, we load it, we select the file to load, it builds, and it works. Now the reason why we have dirt here is because one thing we didn't do, when I was building it, I placed dirt on top of the grass on the same layer. So you need to build, when you're building your tiles, you need to build a way to make sure that the tile isn't over something. So right here, where mouse is over create tile, you can also say if cursor overlapping another object, and that being the reference points, and then negate it, we'll make sure that we don't overlap. And let's test that. So I'm going to put a tile here, and it's not working, so I've done something wrong. If cursor is not overlapping reference points, and reference points are our tiles. Okay, I think I know what the issue here is. The issue is we don't have any tiles created yet. So that's going to be interesting. So why don't we put it here and here. Maybe that'll work. The reason why it didn't work, I believe, is because I can't test against something that doesn't exist yet. Still no go. All right. Well, I'll have to figure out how I did that before. But that's what we need to do. We need to make sure that the cursor is not overlapping an existing tile. And, you know, just to test my theory, we could have one of these tiles created outside the frame. So if I was to save now, I got one tile, and it's telling you it's out of frame. And then using that eventing again, I could say if cursor is overlapping a reference point, negate it. It should work now. Let's take a look. Yes, because there is one to test against. The reason why it wouldn't work yesterday is previously is because we were testing against an object that didn't exist yet. There were no reference points or any of the two tiles. And so now it works. The quick fix is, you see we have 5 items. The problem is when I save, I'm going to have 6 lines, right? So what we can do is before we save the data, right, we could say new event on group activation, and if is outside of the area, then destroy that reference point. So if we run it now, I'm going to do this. So we should only have 4. I'm going to change it I'm going to click brown on these to see if we get more than 5. Save it. I only get 5. And when I run it, I get my 5 back. So that solves that problem. Let's see if we have any other questions. So Jeff, I hope that answers your questions about the different layers. Appreciate the question, and that will be included in the example. And any other questions here? What about the way to encode the saved data? You know, there's a ton of ways to do that, bitmap impact. Maybe later I can share some work I did, not the exact work, obviously, but I wrote my own encoding algorithm. I mean, it's not foolproof, but it obscured the data enough using the string parser object again to encode the data and then unencode the data without having to change save types. And the output for the average person, unless they knew the decode encode algorithm, was nonsensical. And it worked pretty good. The company I did it for, we were having to send and transmit data from an Android app that we wrote in Fusion to a server, and we had to have the data encoded because I didn't want the MySQL databases open. So what I did is all the data I wrote into it, we went into this encoding algorithm, and it passed their security check when they hired a third-party company. So I was pretty happy about that. I'm not saying I'm NSA quality encoding, decoding writer, but the fact that I was able to pull it off in Fusion says a lot about Fusion and made me feel pretty good. And yes, bitmap impact. I love string parser. Great object. Let's see. Jeff has some more comments. How do you deal with the coordinate differences of the layer if they parallax? So you start scroll in a different area and then add tiles to the second layer. Won't it save to the wrong XY coordinates? That's an excellent question. Let's find out. So what I'm going to do is we're going to run the app, and let's see what it does now. So we're on layer 1, and we'll add some grass tiles. We've got a cube of grass tiles. And then using our arrow keys, I'm going to adjust, and I want to put some brown tiles on layer 2. You can see it doesn't line quite up. Now, if I'm not mistaken, when we save the data, it's going to make these points relative to the XY position of this layer. And because this layer in my game engine would also be set to the same offset, it should load in the exact same place. So we're going to save. All the data has been written down. I'm going to close the app. I'm going to run it again. We're going to load it. Load save. And you're correct. We have an issue. I believe we do have an issue, because those were not overlapped when the grass was all the way up here. So yeah, we'd have to figure out how to do that. We could probably do some math based on the percentage. We could, I think it's 50%, so we either have to multiply by 50% or divide by 50% based on the layer, which shouldn't be too hard. You would do that in your loading, and you'd have to run another algorithm. You could do a for each loop. If loop, at the end of load data here, we could do a for each loop that says on every reference point, if reference points on layer X, then adjust based on the percentage of the parallax offset. And maybe I can add that in the next build before I post this to it. That's an excellent question. Hope that answers the question somewhat, but we'll put that in. Any other questions for me? Let's take a look. Now one, Jeff, do you have any more questions concerning that? And we can give it a real quick shot. See if we can do it easily. So, deactivate group load data. Before that, we'll do a fast loop, which I believe count for each object. Check layer. Copy that. And then we'll order it this way so that that happens after the loop. On loop. On each. Check layer. And if compare to general values, position, layer equals layer 2. Then we're going to take the position of X from position X from position X. Let's see what happens when we multiply it by 2. And then position Y by position Y times 2. I think that's it. Guessing off the top of my head. Load, save, and still didn't work. Okay, now we'll do some debugging. Insert an object. We'll do a test list object. Drop that here. And if this triggers, then we're going to add a line that says fired. And then we'll run it. Load. So none of those events triggered, which is interesting. So I'm going to look at our data structure. Make sure that I've got it right. Save. And there it is. There is a layer 2. So the question is, why didn't that trigger? On each layer, so we should make sure that at least it's firing the condition. Load. So it's not even firing the condition, which would tell me that probably it's closing the group, and thus, because I did the close group on the same line, that it probably isn't reading the events. So maybe we try this. Move that, run it again. There we go, now it fired. And look, it moved the objects. So, and it put that all the way over here. So we got a result, not the result we're looking for, but we're closer. So we'd have to experiment with that. Maybe it's, maybe it's dividing the frame width by half and then doing some form of subtraction based on there. I'll have to figure it out. But we're getting closer. And that's the cool thing about programming, whether it be in a scripted language or even in Fusion, is figuring stuff out is the best part. So I'll get that done, and I appreciate it. Next week, we're going to try to do a game stream on Friday, including this regular stream. Everyone's favorite Fusion developer, Windy Beard, is releasing his 3rd game on Steam, and we got a couple giveaway codes that we'll be doing, and we'll play the game, and we'll do some more programming. All the people that's supporting the Reactor, I appreciate it. It helps me do this for you in keeping me at home working full-time on Fusion stuff so that I can provide you more support. I appreciate it. And for those of you that haven't signed up for the Reactor is right here. It's our patron. It's a membership service that allows you to get me to do these things. Free items on the Click Store, one-on-one customer support, and a ton of other features you can find in the rewards categories right here. Again, we appreciate all the support, and we'll see you next week. And I will stick around for a couple minutes to see if there's any other questions. And thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And we'll go. Never can get this right. I think that's right. And then I think it's that.